You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 52 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
I'm just glad that you can remember your own name for once.
Don't know what that's in reference to, but I'm doing well as also doing well. Doing well as well. Jesus, I can already tell it's going to be a train wreck. So, speaking of that, we did have we had one of the most interesting weeks in Flesh and Blood occur recently. There was a banner restricted announcement. Didn't really go as we expected, you could say. But on the note of overwhelming community disappointment, today is also the 1-year anniversary, the 52nd episode of Arsenal Pass. Pretty incredible, Aiden.
Yeah, you've started us off with a bang as well, just high energy coming in hard. That's interesting that on the 52nd episode, the 1-year anniversary of Arsenal Pass, we're going to talk about a banner restricted announcement. It's I think if you look back a year ago, we did our Monarch set review, and then we had a few episodes after that really focused around a few level ups and then some hot topics of discussion, the meta. And then to think, would you have thought 1 year from then we'd be talking about an imminent Pro Tour and a very, very interesting banned and restricted announcement, not because of things that are banned, but because of the things that didn't happen?
I just remember when I was like a Legend Story Studios maximalist, and no matter what they did, I defended them and just erred on the side of them being smarter than us. I think that changed on the 52nd episode here at Arsenal Pass. I don't have anything against them, but might be throwing some critiques their way this time.
All right, Brennan. Well, before we get into talking about the banner restricted announcement, as you said, it's the 52nd episode. It's 1 year of Arsenal Pass. I want to give a massive thank you to everyone who has supported us over the past year. We're also almost at 4,000 subs on YouTube. So thank you to everyone who is a subscriber on YouTube. If you're not, get there, make us 4,000. Hit us 4,000. Maybe by the time this drops, we'll be at 4,000. A double thank you to all of our amazing patrons over the past 5 to 6 months who have enabled us to, grow Arsenal Pass into what it is now, to deliver more content, higher production value. You enable us to have people who've come and help us with production, with managing the content that we do, so that it's not all on me and Brendan, and we're able to put out the stuff that we want to and the stuff that we love. And I actually have a few questions for Brendan around that. I want to hear some of his favorite content that we've done this year. But yeah, what does Brendan? I just want to ask you, what does 1 year mean to you?
What does 1 year mean to me? Well, that's an interesting question. I think that I'm just going to disregard your question and answer it a different way.
Sure, why not? It's not like you don't always do that anyway.
I definitely have occasionally been known to do that. But just thinking back to 1 year ago when we started Arsenal Pass, planning to be a limited-only podcast focused on draft. I think the scope of Arsenal Pass has changed quite a bit, but it's mostly due to the audience, to the listeners. They've helped us grow into something that's actually half decent, I think, and I'm very happy with all the progress we've made. Made the jump over to YouTube, started doing gameplay, and also just really broaden the horizons of what this podcast is and the kind of topics we cover. I'm very happy with where it currently is, and getting to 1 year and having the success that we've had so far. It's been one of the more fulfilling things that I've done probably in my entire life. How about yourself, Hayden?
Wow, that's huge. Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I just think it's down to everyone around us. It's down to, I keep, people poke fun at me for saying the Arsenal Pass family, but it's an Arsenal Pass family. It's in a community, so it is really down to each and every one of you who have built Arsenal Pass with us. So on that note, Brendan, I want to know, in case we've got some new listeners or people who maybe have only listened to the last few episodes, maybe this is their first episode, in which case they're thinking, you guys really like to talk about themselves, don't they? But I promise you, it's not every episode that we do, talk about ourselves. It's usually every second episode, so don't worry about that. Brendan, favorite episode so far? Have you got one for us? Your favorite podcast we've done, either because you really enjoyed recording it, you thought the content was, great. Hey, all the pods are great, right? But stood above the rest. Or just, you just really enjoyable, stands out to you as maybe your favorite pod episode that we've done so far?
Yeah, so I'm just going to piggyback off what you said and just, speaking of narcissism, I think my favorite podcast was The Legend of Fendale. The
I
interview,
knew,
the interview,
friggin' knew it.
yeah, I know you knew. The interview of Hayden Dale post national championship was really cool podcast. We go into arguably we go more into Hayden Dale as a person and sort of his view on life than actually Flesh and Blood. But I thought cool podcast. Kind of put Hayden over the barbecue for an hour or so. But you learned a lot, and yeah, I think it's my favorite.
I was definitely on the grill that day. That's for sure. My favorite episode, and so I don't know what episode number that was, Brendan. If people wanted to,
40 something.
People don't want to go back and listen. I actually think it was prior to then, but that's okay. My favorite episode is probably episode 33. That was our community hot seat episode. I think we had so many questions on that episode and so many topics to cover. I really enjoyed the kind of format that we broke away from the more traditional Arsenal Pass format of, like we're usually very directive in how we do an episode of the pod, but this was kind of all over the place, and there was a lot of different questions, and we were going back and forth and talking about a lot of different topics, and I really enjoyed that. I think that's something that came across very well in the recording. So yeah, if you haven't checked that out, some of the topics now are kind of irrelevant, but some of them are not irrelevant. Like there were some great questions around, just the future of the game, and I'm probably gonna have to go back and listen to it and see where some of the things we said, where we are now as we head towards the first Pro Tour.
Go back and listen to that Tales of Aria Limited review and just cringe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's been some highs and lows, right, of the pod so far, and won't take up too much time talking about this. But I feel like we've had some great episodes, and some episodes where we've felt a bit more down on them. But I think overall we've learned a lot in the past year, and that's going to continue to, I guess, drive what we do next. So on that, Brendan, what do you think is next for Arsenal Pass? What's next for us over the next 12 months? Is there going to be a next 12 months?
Is there going to be a next 12 months? That's a good question. I think the Arsenal Pass podcast is going to be maintained for a while, barring any kind of crazy events. It is something that I think Hayden and I can keep up. We've got a good sort of flow and how we do it, and it doesn't stress me out. I think that the podcast itself rarely stresses me out. The stuff that's less sustainable is more like the gameplay or the X videos per week, and trying to hit those as maybe we go into sort of a lull period of Flesh and Blood, and that correlates with like just a ridiculously busy period in Hayden and I's lives respectively. So those have been the ones that are tough, but the podcast itself, I think that one will exist for a long time. So I'd be willing to bet I'll take the over on another 52 weeks.
Me too. You're right there with you. Yeah, I think one of the changes we made sort of end of last year around that sort of Christmas period was that we were going to decommit from a video every week, and we wanted to make the videos we wanted to make and when we wanted to make them. And I think that's worked. I've enjoyed that so much more, Brendan. And I think the quality of the content has gotten higher because of that. And we're still going to make gameplay videos. We're still going to make tech techs. We're still going to do impromptu videos, but I think it's on our terms. So no, I've been enjoying that so far. I want to ask you, what's a topic that we haven't tackled so far in the first year of Arsenal Pass, but you would really like to tackle, but maybe we haven't because of logistical reasons, or we just don't think that we're able to do it justice in a podcast, or any of those reasons? Maybe you just feel like it's too hot a topic to touch.
I'd love to touch more hot topics, but so there's
you're known for shying away from them, right?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a podcast series that we have right now that is only on Patreon. It's called Zero to Hero. It's in 3 installments. So installment 1 is kind of getting into the game. Installment 2 is sort of competing at the pro in the competitive level in which we have so far, callings, maybe nationals, and then the final one for us. So installment 3 is making that jump to Pro Tour and then World Champion. So I'm excited, maybe post this year to finally finish off the Zero to Hero series and talk about going to the Pro Tour and going to Worlds, and hopefully having a World Championship, a World Champion a part of as one of the podcast hosts. I kind of got lost in my words. I was gonna say on here, but that means we would just interview somebody. No, I'd like for one of us to win the first Flesh and Blood World Championship.
We've all got dreams, Brendan. Yeah, no, I think that's a great shout. It's been something that I've really enjoyed doing, that series, and obviously it's been broken up over time. So I think for me, one of the topics I really want to tackle is, as a welcome to Wraith Boomer, as we like to say, and as someone who loves talking about fundamentals of this game, I would love to talk about and do an episode on pitch stacking and how to effectively pitch stack. It's such a big topic, and I don't even feel that I am versed enough and good enough, to do a whole like introductory, or not even introductory part, but do a comprehensive episode on this. And I think, if we sat down and we worked on it really hard and we had someone come in to maybe help support us with it, I think we could definitely do it. But I want to make sure that when we do that topic, we do it justice. And I don't even know if a pod is like the form to do it. It might be a video, but it's something that I really want to tackle, but I see it as like a bigger kind of production, and it's something that I want to just not half-ass. I want to make sure that it's really detailed in how to get the most out of pitch stacking, how to use some of the tips and tricks to make sure that you can do it for any different type of deck, any different format in this game. And it's also a really hard concept to explain. I know you've tried to explain it to someone before. I know you famously explained it to Steven from Team Covenant, I think, about like how to do it the night before he went and played a Monarch sealed event, and then he just did it and just dominated the sealed event. But it's such a hard concept to explain to people. So I think it's something I want to do this year at some point, though. It's on my list.
Yeah. It'd also be nice if we could witness a future classic constructed format where it was relevant as well.
I have to wait for that. Well, maybe not.
For Legend Story, it's just speed go up, I think, every single set. Yeah, I mean, if you played Starvo this set, obviously Michael Stack is playing heavy for second cycle. So, yeah, it was really cool. But there are definitely some very good players I know that actually don't believe that the second cycle of the deck even exists.
Oh. Anyway, we can ignore that. That's 10 minutes of us talking about Arsenal Pass, and just again, big thank you to everyone. And we've had such an amazing time this first year, and we're here to do it again for another year at least. So on that, we're almost at 4,000 subscribers. Brendan, I did say last week we had a giveaway for, I guess, the 4,000 subscribers as well, and of course we do have our big golden ticket giveaway. And I don't want to saturate the pod with a bunch of giveaways, but I did say that for 4,000 subscribers we would give away a box of Everfest. So let's just make it fun. I want to ask people, just literally drop a comment on this episode of the pod on YouTube and just let me know, which historical figure do you think would like Arsenal Pass and why? One sentence. We're just going to draw it at random, but if it's funny, I'm probably going to give you 2 or 3 entries. There you go.
Damn. I would have liked it to be come up with the best nickname for Hayden Dale.
No.
Funniest one wins.
Okay. No. Anyway, get in the draw for the box. We'll draw it on the pod next week. Just, drop a short comment on the video below. And thank you for getting us to 4K subscribers. Anyway, Brendan, this week in Flesh and Blood, what have you been playing?
Oh, yeah. So this week was really exciting. So there's been sort of this this weird period after the calling Indianapolis and before the most recent ban and restricted announcement, where it felt like there was no reason to test, We understood the format really well. We didn't know what was coming in the announcement. And the upcoming announcement was going to clarify that, and we could all sort of put our heads in the dirt or whatever and just work hard and figure it out and, schedule testing times and just grind, right? So I was waiting on that, which was cool. So I didn't really get a lot of testing in. And then that time came. And we'll talk about that later in the pod. But I would say some testing just to kind of play around, right, in the interim. But nothing really hardcore. Was really waiting for that announcement to give me some more clear vision. So kind of a more relaxed week in Flesh and Blood. I do have the SCG Dallas this weekend on Sunday. It's going to be a Blitz event. I think it's a battle hardened. So yeah, maybe it'll be fun. I'll be playing Viscerai. But yeah, what about you, Hayden? How was your week?
Well, sounds very similar. So recorded some videos. I did a couple of deck tech videos. Otherwise, just took a bit of a break in anticipation of the ban restricted announcement, as you say. And then, just a few games here and there of Classic Constructed, just trying out some things and looking at some heroes that maybe I'm less familiar with that I want to make sure that I'm getting more familiar with as we head towards the Pro Tour, just because maybe we don't know what's going to happen. But as you say, we'll talk about that in the main topic of the pod. How about some news? Brendan? All right, well...
No. Oh, wait, that's ESPN, but that counts.
Top of the news, Brendan, and restricted update. Can't really go past it, can we? It's the main topic of the pod, so we won't dive into it here, but I did just want to give the top line changes to Blitz and Classic Constructed, just so everyone's aware.
What were they?
No changes. No changes to Classic Constructed or Blitz. So,
okay. Well, at least we'll have the same format until the Pro Tour.
Well,
or during the Pro Tour.
Also in the ban and restricted announcement, LSS have said on the 2nd of May there will be another ban and restricted announcement coming. So that is exactly what's that? 11 days before the Pro Tour, 12 days before the Pro Tour, 11 days before kickoff. So just to be aware that is coming. If you haven't already heard about it, I'm sure at this point everyone who listens to Arsenal Pass has heard about the ban restricted announcement and what's happening. Along with that, though, is some updates to Battle Hardened, and this definitely caused some confusion during the ban restricted announcement, which I know Brendan, you may have tweeted about. But during the ban restricted announcement, they did say, Starvo could become living legend, and here's the kind of schedule for the Battle Hardened. And then there were 2 Battle Hardens on there that, as far as we knew, were not classic constructed. But it turns out that there's been 2 additional Battle Hardens added. So the classic constructed Battle Hardens coming up, we have Battle Hardened Krakow, we have the Calling Taiwan, which is classic constructed, but then we have Battle Hardened Madrid, Battle Hardened Taiwan, and Battle Hardened Pittsburgh added in there as well. So that's the classic constructed, and then we also do have another one at Taiwan as well, which I believe is Welcome to Rake Limited, isn't it? With like a top 8.
Yeah, I was like, that's very. I wish I was playing that one.
Yeah.
I'm really jealous. Actually, that sounds awesome.
Ep52.com over on the mothership, there's a really cool interview up with Michael Hamilton, who is the second 2-time calling winner. Someone random asked me to make sure I put that into the news that Michael's the second person to do that. I don't know about them. But it's a really cool interview. Congratulations again to Michael for picking up that win. And shout out to Rob and Tarek, who are taking over the Arsenal Pass mantle and doing the Blitz Gauntlet. We did the Everfest ProQuest Gauntlet. They're picking up on fabtcg.com and doing an Everfest Blitz Gauntlet. Stepping into our shoes. Hope they can fill them, Brendan. Best of luck to the boys there. No, so far, really cool games. I think the last one was Lexi versus Islander. And I think before that, they did a classic Viserai versus Oldham, I think. So we go check those out. Up on our channel, I put up a Dash deck tech this week, and there's Rhinar to come. It should be up around the time the pod drops, if not then in the day after. The 2 decks, or 2 of the 3 decks that I played this season, or skirmish, the 3 skirmishes I played in the first 2 weekends, taking a break for the last 2 weeks of skirmish. Got a few things on, so wanted to throw those deck techs up. I did post on Twitter and say, what would people like to see, and those 2 got quite a lot of votes, so I just recorded both of them. I had tons of fun playing that Dash deck, so it was the one I wanted to prioritize. But of course, it's Rhinar. I can't not look at Rhinar, Brendan. So Rhinar deck tech for Blitz also to come.
Yeah, win classic constructed. So speaking of the anniversary of Arsenal Pass, we did do a special podcast for the Patreon, which is actually the history of Flesh and Blood as witnessed by Mr. Hayden Dale and myself. We talk about all the little formats that have come about, what they were like, welcome to Wraith up till now. Reminisce a little bit about our boomer days, hit some nostalgia notes, but also tell some pretty funny stories. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested. I love, personally, there's nothing more that I love than actually just like kind of like listening to stories of Flesh and Blood. Recently I've been vicariously doing that through Magic the Gathering, like looking back at the old Pro Tours, just kind of in preparation for what I hope we'll witness in this game in the future. It's awesome. I love the experience. And finally, a shout out to the Arsenal Pass Patreon. By supporting us, you help us do what we do, and the support has been incredible. Our Patreon does have extra content if you are interested, including that the extra podcast I mentioned, deck techs and deck guides, as well as some spicy stuff. For instance, Hayden and I did a commentary over my winning in game in the Calling Indianapolis, and I gave a detailed breakdown of sort of the lines and play-by-plays as we progress through that match.
Yep, really enjoyed doing that. Bit of fun. All right, Brendan.
Spoiler: I lose.
Spoiler: you didn't add another top 8 to your record. It's kind of a funny match to do, right?
I don't want to bait anybody. Yeah,
it's a winning in, but it's like we know Brendan didn't top 8, so a bit of a no. It's not an anticlimax because the game is a great game and there's a lot to break down in the game. So, and one of the most important matchups in the current format, and maybe could be the format. Anyway, we'll get to that. First of all, though, it's time to give away a trip to New Jersey. Well, we're giving away part of a trip to New Jersey as much as we're going to call it what are we calling it? The Arsenal Pass Golden Ticket, I guess. Just to recap.
It's Vandel's Golden Ticket.
Oh, is it? Okay, all right. Last week in the pod, we did announce that for 1 year sort of anniversary and heading to PT New Jersey and the calling, we did want to give someone access to some flights and entry to the calling if they needed that as well, up to $500. To help someone, a community legend, someone in some of our local communities in North America who maybe might need a helping hand to get there. and we wanted to provide that. So we did. We got a lot of, to be honest, Brendan, we got so many entries. I think there was like 90 plus comments on last week's episode, and so many deserving people as well. So many awesome comments. People obviously putting forward other people, but also for themselves, which we did ask as well for people to put forward themselves, and just some amazing stories as well. So Brendan doesn't know this, but I've gone and picked through. We have 4 finalists for this, and then we're just going to actually randomize the winner from our 4 finalists. But these were some of my favorite stories. I wanted to share them on the pod as well. That these people were put forward for, I guess, for this prize. So Brendan, the first was actually for Michael. Michael was out in Oregon, and he was put forward by Kate, who is co-owner at Mox Valley Games, out over that way. And Kate said that they'd like to nominate Michael just for all the work that Michael has done in building that Fab community. They've got such an insanely wholesome and friendly group at Mox Valley Games over there. But Michael's been a real positive driving force for the game and has gone above and beyond to open the gate to new players. When they hosted their ProQuest event in March, Michael actually gave out Everfest packs to other players, I believe, of his own. Made top 8, but didn't make it to that sort of first slot. Would love to see Michael over in New Jersey. So that was just one of them. Another person that we had a lot of comments for was Nia Tran in Canada. So Nia is, I think, one of the sort of,
I know, yeah,
you know, Nia.
I know this guy.
Yeah. A founding father, I'm going to say, or a founding member of Flesh and Blood in Canada. Lending decks to people, just being a great person in that scene, a pillar of the local store. And I know someone posted that comment. I think it was Joel. Said they wanted to nominate Nia, and then just tons of backing comments for Nia. So just clearly someone who's well respected and deserving in that community, who's done a fantastic job to build that community up from just a few players, whether that be through their online sort of community during COVID, whether it be in-store play, lending decks to players, things like that. So that's just such a really cool thing to see. And then next would be Hasiel Diaz, who's out in, I believe, Florida. Hasiel actually had by far the most people plug and say that they wanted to see Hasiel win this. Is just been a massive part of that community, building that South Floridian community. Just apparently he has banger food recommendations as well. I've heard as well. So just someone who, lending cards to people, just taking time out to not even play events, but to teach people the game. Gets together and provides cards for people and is open for play testing, just always available to play games, and has just been a massive part of that community. I think we had like 10 comments for Hasiel, so big shout out to you. And then lastly was Elaine. So Elaine was put forward by Anarchy Please from Louisiana, apparently. Just been playing Flesh and Blood not long now, but has really dived into it. Been to multiple ProQuests. I think went for ProQuest first or second week playing the game, went 2-3, and then the next week went 4-1-1, just missing top 8. So a short Flesh and Blood career, but apparently is putting a lot of effort into it. And Anarchy just says that she's a real embodiment of everything that is awesome about Flesh and Blood as a community. Super friendly, super lovely, approachable. Just wants to play the game hard but fair, and is really enjoying building the game out as we kind of know it. So, Brendan, all finalists here, all very deserving, and there's so many other people who submitted themselves and other people, and some amazing stories out there. But we can only give one away this time. So, I've assigned numbers randomly to these entries. You can just give me a number between 1 and 4, and we're gonna have our winner.
I've got the golden ticket, as they would say.
Spin around in a circle, close your eyes, and hold it out to someone.
Jesus. All right. Oh man, I love how we just picked up on that reference so perfectly. I'm gonna go with number 1.
Number 1. All right. Let me refer to this page. Congratulations to Hasiel, who is as our winner of the Fiendale's Golden Ticket, as Brendan is going to call it. Clearly someone who's very, very deserving, has a lot of support from their local community, and I think they're all going to be very excited to see you in New Jersey. So we'll be in contact with the details. So congratulations.
I'm gonna be asking for food recommendations the next time I'm in Florida.
Oh, me too.
I actually go there. I go there a lot. So,
All right, Brendan.
oh well, speaking of food, you smell that, Hayden? Smell that on the grill? Some good old Floridian barbecue this week. Tell me what we got in the Command and Cookout section, sir.
Let's do it. So if you want to get your question for the Command and Cookout, as always, you can email, postcard, post on the YouTube. Just say you've got a question for the Command and Cookout. Tweet at us. Tweet around us. You can, any way you want, really. Just get a question for the Command and Cookout. On our community Discord for our patrons as well, we do get quite a lot of questions. And this is where this one comes from Shugo, who says, while we do know there's an introductory product coming in May, prior to the only new player product we've had, are the Tales of Aria and Monarch Blitz decks, which contain some pretty complex mechanics for just starting out, comparatively to Welcome to Wraith. The Aria decks are great, but not necessarily accessible to everyone, and not to mention the early sets are now out of print, albeit still currently accessible. I know there's speculation about some changes coming in the near future. I think maybe Shugo's referring to this Fab 2.0 that's kind of floated around and what that kind of means. However, speaking from today's standpoint, what would you do? How would you go about introducing Fab to a player? Great question, I think, and something that continually changes. I think for me personally, Brendan, these battle decks, yeah. The Rhinar versus Dorinthia that's coming out in May seems to me like a really exciting way to introduce people to the game. It has the fundamentals of two of the original heroes, non-talented heroes of Flesh and Blood, and it gives it to you in this accessible kind of product that you can buy and then have that available to you as a Blitz deck to then go and upgrade. So potentially ability to access, one of the more introductory formats, a Blitz format that is, I guess, touted as one that is faster games, easier to get into, and then you already have this deck. There's obviously a new version of the hero, new weapon, plus specialization card. That's what we know at least. There could be other cards in there. And then you have both. So you have access to these, you can play them, you can try them, and then you can also, buy it, try it, play it with a friend. You could even buy this, gift it to a friend, play with them and teach them the game, I guess. And I think that's a really good introductory point. You get this kind of play mat in there, you have these ready to play decks, and from there, newer players can go and upgrade as they like. I think that probably is going to be the premier way to get players into the game. And I remember in Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, even Crucible, people would ask me, like, which is a good hero to start with? I'd often say Bravo, but I also thought Rhinar and Dorinthia were both good heroes to learn because they taught you a lot about just using your hand, using your arsenal, and also the combat chain.
Yeah. So there is one product that wasn't mentioned, and that's the classic constructed Welcome to Wraith decks. They eventually did go out of print, but
yeah, go find
that
those.
was a good. They were pretty good introductory products, to be honest. The balance on them maybe not the greatest ever, but that was how I learned the game. Actually, was buying all those, playing those decks. But my answer is going to be a little bit boring, Hayden, because I echo everything you said, and I can expand upon why. Like the way that I originally learned Magic was by playing dual decks with my partner at the time. We would just buy those dual decks, and it's going to make a lot of people cringe because there's probably not a worse Magic experience than playing dual decks, but I loved it. So having this sort of, you've never played Brute before, you've never played Warrior before, let's go pick up that deck and we can just dive into it, right? It's all set up, it's ready to go, you get your playmat, could even be your first experience of Flesh and Blood at all. It's such a perfect product, and I like that you have this sort of dichotomy between the warrior class and the brute class, whereas with the Ira decks, it was just kind of two of the same decks. So I think it's really exciting, and I think this is a perfect product to introduce new players to the game.
I kind of want to add on, I think there's a bit of I kind of see bringing a new player in as a bit of a process. I mean, kind of interesting because most of the players that I've shown this game to, 2 or 3 games, and they're like, yeah, this game's awesome, I'm hooked, right? But the problem I find is that where do they go next? So you teach them the fundamentals of the game, and then I notice a lot of players get lost really quickly. Things become overwhelming, the combat chain, reaction phase, all these things that are happening become a lot. And then all of a sudden it's there's talented heroes, there's so many mechanics. I have friends who have tried to play the game. They really enjoyed the basics, especially around people around the time of Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, Crucible that I taught the game to. Monarch, I think, made it a bit tougher just with the, it's hold on, what's happening here? All of a sudden there's auras, what are these cards? There is that kind of piece that's maybe a little bit tough to understand. But I think with what you get with these dual decks, especially for the base set, is a great entry point. Or even you can just build up sort of, commoner decks or whatever from some of the earlier heroes that are a bit more straightforward, easier to learn. There is deck lists for these, those Welcome to Wraith hero decks that Brendan talked about. And also they made some for Arcane Rising, theoretically, deck lists for sort of entering the game.
Yeah.
You can find those up on the Fab TCG website. I'd recommend building some of those out. I think those are great. But I think the Monarch Blitz decks and like those kind of products, even there's Tales of Aria ones, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
Sorry, I just forgot.
We just didn't buy them, but yeah, they're definitely
I think I actually have some because I bought some to play with some friends. But I think those are like a step down the road. So once people have learned the basics, I think get them in on some of the more basic heroes, introductory heroes, and then start to teach them some of the ways talented classes work. And then from there, I think you have access to, I guess, kind of go whatever way they want. You can teach them more of the fundamentals and stuff. But I think I see now those kind of Blitz decks that we saw from Monarch and Tales of Aria probably as like the secondary step to bringing someone into the game and teaching them because they're a bit less straightforward.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I still think there's definitely a jump. Like there's that jump from even those blitz decks into like full class constructed play is pretty interesting. But I don't have a solution right now on how we kind of change that and mitigate that. And it's weird for me to reflect on it too because I sort of very much organically grew with the game as it came out, like especially in the United States. So this coming into the game and now being overwhelmed by so many heroes, all these talents, keywords, and just kind of crazy interactions sometimes. There's a lot. There's definitely a lot more than when I started, and I thought it was complicated back then.
Yeah, I do think one of the best ways to introduce a new player to Fab, though, is get them to focus on what they're doing. So, we talk about a lot in Arsenal Pass, like playing both sides of the board. Like that is getting it to a competitive state and really starting to understand the format and what's happening on both sides of the board. As a new player, and even as a casual player, like you don't need to worry about that. Focus on what's happening on your side of the board. Find something that a new player really enjoys, whether they identify with the hero, they identify with the playstyle, the art, some of the cards in the deck, whatever it is that they can latch onto, and then just get them to practice that and find that. And as they start playing into different things, they're going to learn what's happening in the rest of the game, right? They're going to see their opponent playing Prism. They're going to see their opponent playing Levia. They're going to see their opponent playing maybe Bravo Star of the Show. I don't know. And learn about the game that way. And then they can pivot and change and they can try something else. And I think that's a great way to do it. So just want to add on, because we had a secondary question kind of adding on to this from Fancy, who said, taking on to that, all of the starter decks have been explicitly for the Blitz format, well, except for the ones you talked about, Brendan. How would you go about introducing a player to Classic Constructed specifically when we talk about this? What, if anything, would you see in the future for this? Well, I think the Blitz decks, right, which of these dual decks are great. I think Blitz is a good way to start people into the game. I think it's actually good to progress from Blitz into Classic Constructed, to be honest. I think you learn a lot of fundamentals. You can learn them quick. Things, the turn cycles are faster. There's less depth to the game. But in terms of transitioning people into Classic Constructed, I think the best way is honestly like get the fundamentals under you and then start on maybe some of these decks that they identify with. So maybe they've been playing a bunch of Lexi in Blitz. Okay, cool. Here's a Lexi Classic Constructed deck, or this is how Lexi works in Classic Constructed. Try and teach them the differences, teach them about why these games are longer, and then let them play these games. And I guarantee, because of the fundamentals they've learned in Blitz, after some number of games, depending on, it's always individual, they will start to pick up the Classic Constructed sort of nuances and differences. I have no doubt about that. I think Blitz is actually a great format to start from, just from fundamentals.
Yeah,
sure.
I do hope that they come out with introductory products for Classic Constructed though, because those decks add like a sort of vector of competing that is interesting for all types of players. It's good for new players, but you can also host events with those decks, and they can actually be pretty fun because they're very balanced.
I played one actually. I played one. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so did I. I played a Monarch one
yeah.
for the Monarch Blitz decks. But yeah, those are, so I think they're great products. I think what they're doing with the with the new Rhinar versus not Rhinar, but Brute versus Warrior one, where they're adding in the look and they're kind of beefing up the entire product to give the player more than just cards. I think that's really cool. And I like that, fleshing out the lore, fleshing out a lot of stuff that attracts you when you first come to a game. Some people aren't just about the math and the raw gameplay.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for the questions, Hugo and Fancy. And with that said, Brendan, let's move on to the main topic. So today we're going to talk about the ban restricted announcement. Breaking down the announcement itself, I think this is important to start with because you've got to remember, Brendan, although this has been kind of the hot news, the hot topic, not everyone would have kind of been across what's happening. And we also want to talk through just some of the discourse that's happening around it, just what we're hearing, let people know about that. What this means for the PT, we're going to talk about that. What this means for the calling in New Jersey. Let's not forget we have a calling coming up on the same weekend as the Pro Tour, the ProQuest season. Our thoughts and feelings on this for the game and for players in general. And also share some predictions maybe for May 2nd and what we want to see from LSS next and what we'd like to see what we'd do if maybe we had the keys to make some of these decisions. So first of all, Brendan, let's break it down. The announcement. What does the announcement actually say? Well, I'm going to share this quickly. So this was published on the 5th of April. We're currently recording on the 7th of April in my time. That's the 6th for you. So we're just, less than 48 hours removed from this announcement. Classic Constructed is no changes. And LSS said, Bravo star of the show is the deck to beat on an impressive ProQuest Season 1 performance. In the recent victory at the Calling Indianapolis that featured 4 different heroes in the top 8. Zavo, as he's become known, is currently sitting at 814 points on the Living Legend leaderboard, well on his way to a 1,000-point threshold. So LSS making it pretty clear that they're pointing out the Living Legend system here in relation to Star of the Show, which we can dive into a bit more soon, Brendan. But they make that pretty clear even in the first, the second sentence, that Living Legend is in play here, right? Also, they then go on to talk about the remaining Living Legend points for the season with Classic Constructed events available through Battle Hardened events and through the Calling Taiwan, so that players are aware of just how many Living Legend points that the Star of the Show could get between now and May 2nd, and that date is important for a reason that we'll talk about very shortly. But LSS do say that their intent for the competitive season through to the end of April is to be played out with no changes to the banner restricted list, and that Pro Tour New Jersey to be the first major event to tackle a new metagame. So if you were to read that face value, right, LSS are saying that they feel there could very well be a new metagame to tackle it at the Pro Tour New Jersey, is what it sounds like. And so they're making no changes to Classic Constructed this time. But then, this is the important piece. May 2nd, Brendan. Legend Story Studios say the next ban restricted announcement is scheduled for May 2nd, which is the day after Battle Hardened Pittsburgh, which is the last Classic Constructed event we have that awards Living Legend points between now and Pro Tour number 1. At which point it is possible that, so back to what LSS say, at which point it is possible that Bravo star of the show will have achieved Living Legend status. It is also possible that he will not, and that he's part of the metagame heading into Pro Tour New Jersey. Based on the results of the upcoming competitive events, and considering more than just Living Legend status of Bravo, we will make changes to the ban and restricted list at that time if deemed necessary. Lastly, this approach is to intend to put the challenge of exploring a revised metagame in the hands of the elite group of players taking part at the Pro Tour. So that's the announcement. Before we even get to, I guess, the discourse around this announcement and what's happened, I just want to get your thoughts on the wording of this ban restricted announcement.
Yes,
because I personally think that I've read this multiple times. I've read all the versions, multiple times because there has been some changes just as the Battle Hardens have solidified and new dates released. But I think the wording is really specific. Like people have said that I think some of the discourse is, this feels a little bit like lazy, or this feels like it was kind of rushed maybe the day before. I think the wording in this statement is really, really purposeful around what they're saying, especially in the second half of that statement around exploring a new metagame in the hands of elite players and April to be played out with no changes, but then Pro Tour New Jersey to be the first major event to tackle a new metagame. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, but the way I'm reading this is that we are going to see changes come May 2nd, whether that be Zavo Living Legend or it be changes to the banner restricted list.
Yes. So I think if you look at this series of paragraphs in a vacuum, its intent is pretty clear, right? The message is clear. So the reason why I don't put as much weight as you do on what is said here is because this, in the context of what Legendary Studios has told us in the past, is extremely contradictory, and it doesn't make any sense, right? It's pretty much the opposite of what we expected for a lot of very good reasons, for things that they've said in interviews in the past, and from the decisions we've seen made in the past as well. It contradicts all of that, and I would argue that it actually reads like the person writing this isn't really the person in charge, and I think that's why we saw 4 different versions in less than 6 hours. So I do wonder who's driving here, per se, who's really steering the ship. And I find it hard to read into this, super hard, because it feels like it doesn't feel engineered. Like it doesn't feel like this is engineered very, I don't know, with a lot of integrity, right? Like this was the intent. We were planning for this. This is what we expected to happen on May 2nd. And the things that they quote later, which is like, we want this revised meta for the Pro Tour. It's like, I don't believe that, right? I feel like that happened retroactively after they've decided they want to kind of punt the ball down the road a month. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can dig into why some of these things don't make sense, right? Just like they quote Living Legend as a way to maybe sort of keep Starvo in check, and we very contradictory things that's in the past. And then this end where they talk about a revised metagame that hands the elite group of players to make the Pro Tour more exciting.
Yeah. Sorry. I saw you stop on my camera and I thought, yeah. Can we break it down? Because you've said quite
Yeah.
a lot of stuff there. So let's start with what are the contradictory points in your eyes? Like, what are these points that you think are contradictory to what we've seen in the past? Let's start with that, because I know people are going to probably be sitting there listening and saying, what are the contradictory points? Maybe they're not fully familiar
Yeah.
with previous statements from legendary studios around ban restricted.
So Living Legend is not a system that's meant to keep the game balanced. It's meant to serve the function of rotating heroes out in an eternal format where things, exist forever, right? Sets don't rotate out themselves, and keep it fresh, and stuff like that, right? I originally thought that the intent was actually to keep the format healthy. I thought it was its own way of sort of keeping things in check. And I got yelled at very loudly by a mob on the YouTube comments. That was not the case, and they were right, because James White has actually said
Did it?
this in an interview. He said it in an interview, right? So we know that this is actually not the intent, the original intent, at least, right, of the Living Legend system. So that first line throws us for a loop. We're like, that's not what you said, right? That's not what we expect.
To be fair though, they're not necessarily saying that, that they're looking for Living Legend to balance Star of the Show. I guess what they're saying here is that Star of the Show is close to Living Legend, pointing out a fact. So I do think, do need to be careful about what LSS is saying here, because they do say that their intent for the competitive season through to the end of April is to be played out with no changes. So I think they're not saying that Living Legend is the answer here, because they do also say that come May 2nd, whether or not Savo is Living Legend or not, doesn't mean that Star of the Show is going to stick around. They've said that we will make changes to the ban restricted list at this time if deemed necessary. But I do agree with you, and this is the discourse around this, is that seems like the goalposts are shifting and that they're trying to use Living Legend as a way to take care of this without having to actually touch anything on the banned and restricted list, which feels contradictory to what we've sort of heard and seen in the past. Even if that necessarily isn't the intent that they're saying, it feels like that might be some of the intent behind this decision to basically postpone any ban restricted announcement until the 2nd of May, which we can get into why that's ruffling some feathers later on. But I just wanted to talk about the statement itself first of all. So any other contradictory sort of things you see in there?
Well, counterpoint to what you said, because when they put this out, the events that were currently that were going to be played, that were class constructed, would have made it numerically impossible for Bravo Star of the Show to actually reach Living Legends. So they were wrong. This was incorrect, what they said. But then they sort of retrofitted the OP system and added 2 more battle hardens so that it was actually possible, right? So they've added more to make Living Legend an acquirable thing, right? And it's something that was done after, or maybe it was done before, but it just feels weird, right? Like, it feels like they're like, okay, well, we want to make it at least possible that he can reach this. And it's like, why?
But that's the thing, I think. So you're drawing inferences there, right? That is not explicitly stated. We don't know when the battle hardens were decided upon. It very well could have been that the battle hardens were decided upon a few weeks ago and they just were not scheduled, like that, in terms of they weren't published. We know that LSS has a lag time between publishing. We've known about ProQuest Season 2 for how long, and hasn't actually been announced on the page yet for players, ProQuest Season 2, right? Or maybe it was last week, but the retailer sort of information was out for multiple weeks before that even happened. So I do just want to say that, I get what you're saying, and I do feel some of those feelings that you have about very suspicious that we now have 2 additional battle hardens. They weren't in the original, or they were in the original, I guess, event printing, but those events weren't announced outside of that. So this is kind of like parallel of like, wait, what's happening here? These don't actually add up. It turns out they do.
My inference actually comes from the version of the article that existed before the one you see here, which they updated without telling anybody, of course, where there was 3 events listed and it was numerically impossible. It's very clear. We didn't know what the other events were. So that's why it's like, But follow me down the paragraph a little bit and we'll find the biggest bologna sandwich of them all, which is this approach is intended to put the challenge of exploring a revised metagame in the hand of elite group of players taking on the Pro Tour. Adorable, right? And that's fine if that was actually the intent. There's a way of organically doing that, which is having the Pro Tour soon after a set release, right? That's exciting. New heroes. It's actually something new. But just sort of artificially creating this by banning things to your content 2 weeks before, not very exciting in my opinion, and actually kind of unimaginative and dull. I don't like it. It feels like, it just feels like there's why, right? Like it doesn't I legitimately don't think that was the intent, right? If we're going to schedule a Pro Tour at the end of a set, like this was purposely put at the very end of Everfest, why would the intent of that to be to have a shake shake up the metagame and have something totally new on camera? I feel like they did that with the intent of having it sort of accessible, and I don't know if solve this is the right word, but that's the one that really irks me, is like this idea that this is helping the elite group of players to do stuff like this. And by the way, we can talk about this more later, but this really only helps a very subset group of players in that pro player group that they've pointed at here, and that's the people that have resources, that have testing groups, and have a lot of disposable time to work during that 2 weeks. The average player, this is very bad for. And not the average player, like average flesh and blood player, but the average pro player, who maybe has their friend that they test with, they have a couple people they meet a few times each week. This is very bad for them, and I don't like that.
Tell us how you really feel. No. I think not that I disagree with necessarily anything you're saying, but I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit in terms of, at no point to LSS in the statement say that they think it's good for the pro players or for the elite players to have this change. I think what they're saying is they're saying that they're putting forward a challenge potentially, whether you think that that's fully intentional or they're trying to tack that on based on what's happened with this sort of announcement. But anyway, there's a lot of, I want to dive into what you said, but first of all, let's talk about just kind of what's being said in the community, just some of the discourse around this, just the general sort of feeling, because I know you hosted a Twitter Spaces, I think yesterday or the day before, with Tarek Patel and a few others, and I did listen to bits and pieces, but I also didn't want to be influenced and swayed by what you said, so I tried to actually come up with a lot of my own notes before I even listened to that, so that I kind of had my viewpoint and thoughts, and I definitely feel strongly on a few things. But first of all, Brendan, because you were a part of this, what's kind of the general sentiment from the player base that you're hearing so far through the Twitter Spaces, through interaction on Twitter, things like that?
Sure. So I'm definitely more, I guess, surprisingly, slightly on the extreme side, only because of I'm not really going to budge on the critiques and pretend like it was, by design. But that being said, if you've ever seen that meme that's like everybody disliked that, it's like an Xbox button and says everybody, I don't know, I can't remember what it is, but that's pretty much it. Nobody really likes it. Everybody hates it. Like it's sort of collectively overwhelming. The overwhelming feedback is that this was handled about as poorly as it could be handled, and they don't enjoy it. Like, I think no changes would have been kind of bad for the game, right? And bad for a lot of players, especially like, players that aren't going to Pro Tour and just like play this game, play Classic Constructor for fun at their armories. Like, people wanted a change. I was very okay with no changes. But this whole idea where like we waited for this announcement for quite a while after calling Indianapolis, they had plenty of time to prepare, and it just goes punt it down a month. Like, people are kind of pissed about that.
The criticism or the negative peaks, I guess, is it coming from the decision to not ban anything? Is it coming from the decision to place another announcement for May 2nd? Is it coming from the announcement itself and what happened surrounding that with multiple revisions to it, the battle hardened things? Is it coming from the wording used in this announcement? Like, where are the critiques coming from, or where are the kind of negative feedback coming from? And is there anything that people are taking positives out of this so far that you've seen?
Sure. So the negative feedback is everything that you said except the first one, which is people are irritated because there's no bans and they wanted something banned. I think most people wouldn't have been happy with it, but they were okay and they were expecting, and like, no bans. Like, that was a very reasonable outcome. It's okay, right? Everything after that is what people are angry about. There is one person had a positive take, which was Brian Gottlieb, one of the casters for the Calling Indianapolis. He said, he put forth the idea that maybe it makes it more interesting for coverage, right? People are going to be watching it. There might be unexpected decks, things like this. And it's not just kind of, we've been in this really, I would consider this last format to be quite unfun. And it was dominated by two decks, right? If you watched the coverage, it didn't really look like that, but they were going quite far down the tables to find interesting matchups. And he talked about that, right? He said there might be more representation, more deck diversity higher up in the tables, and it could be more interesting for coverage. And I think that's a reasonable point.
Yep, I would agree. Okay, so obviously we've got a statement from LSS. We've got a decision that May 2nd is the next ban restricted announcement. We've got reaction from the community. I think, just to echo, I've heard a lot of the same sentiments. I think there was a lot of The handling, I think, is something that people are probably most upset about, just in terms of the fact that it was really unclear and felt like we're being set up for this announcement on this date to be preparation for the Pro Tour and for the Calling New Jersey and for ProQuest Season 2. Lest we forget about talking to ProQuest Season 2 the weekend of New Jersey, to say, hey, 6 weeks out, here's the changes or 5 weeks out, here's the changes to the format. This is what the format's going to look like as we close out Everfest through New Jersey, through maybe even Taiwan, right, through the Calling in Taiwan, and Krakow for Blitz. Let's not forget this is a Blitz announcement as well, and we'll get to that after Classic Constructed. This is what it looks like. And to say, and for people to have that date, okay, first of all, nothing happened, okay, is what it is. But this date of May 2nd has really sort of taken people aback. Like, hold up, now we're going to have an announcement 2 weeks before New Jersey, less than 2 weeks, 11 days before New Jersey for the Calling and the Pro Tour, and 11 days before the start of ProQuest Season 2. That's put a lot of people at unease. I think that's stressed me out, to be honest. It's caused me to feel stressed because I was not expecting that announcement. I don't think anyone was expecting them to say, hey, less than a month from now, we're going to have another ban restricted announcement, because that's not been a pattern that's emerged so far. It's been, fairly like, hey, here's the season, here's the announcement. Here's the season, here's the announcement. Here's the ProQuest season, here's the announcement coming after this. And that's what I think people had come to expect. So that's why people, from my understanding, and I also feel this, not feeling good about this announcement. And then on top of that, just the handling of things has not gone down well, especially amongst a lot of very vocal people, I think, in terms of just, there's battle hardens, there's not battle hardens, what's the intent. I think people have felt that LSS have been pretty transparent with a lot of things. This is not one of them, is also the feedback I've heard as well, in terms of this is very confusing. This doesn't feel congruent with a lot of things that we've seen previously. Like Brendan talked about the inconsistencies with Living Legend and the use of the ban restricted and the timing of it doesn't necessarily feel as congruent for a lot of people. So that's probably summarizing, I guess, what we're seeing out in the community in terms of just the feedback. And I don't think it's, it's not Brendan alone, it's not me alone. There's a lot of sentiments. But I will say, as much as I have heard very few positive takes on this, Brendan, and one that I did hear that part in the Twitter Spaces that you did do, that Brian did share about the coverage, and I agree. I think having fresh format for coverage for people to really get on and watch and sink their teeth into and be like, wow, like this hero, like that is something really exciting. And I think that's something really exciting when you get a new set. You get a new set release, and then 2 weeks later,
I kind of agree, because I was like, there's another way of doing this, right?
Sure.
And I think this is the worst of those two.
Right. So let's talk about, I guess, I want to talk about what this actual announcement means for the Pro Tour and for ProQuest season and for the Calling, etc. But first of all, I want to talk about maybe some ways that this could have been handled better from LSS. And I've got a couple of points, and I'll let you think about it while I talk, Brendan. But for me, the May 2nd date is a big thing. So I'm on with Brendan. I think the no changes is what it is. I wasn't... had they just said no changes, the next ban restricted announcement will be upon the release of our next set, fine. I would have been like, yeah, not great, not feeling ideal about that. I would like to have seen something banned, but expectations are there. We've had the flow that we expected, a ban restricted announcement, a change to the format, and now we're heading into the Pro Tour. Okay, cool. Or we get that ban restricted announcement and something does get banned, and that is also fine. I think the one that's probably needed to be handled better is this expectation around a second date in May. Why is this date? So no reason was given in terms of why this is the selected date. I mean, you can draw some conclusions that it's because it's after battle hardened Pittsburgh and we have Living Legend points for Star of the Show, and I think that's a lot of the conclusion that people are drawing right now. But could we not be a bit more upfront and a bit more honest about the span and restricted announcement? How close is Starvo to, is Starvo, do they actually see Starvo as an issue? That wasn't addressed at all. Whereas last time there was this big explanation about Briar and the fun of the game and how it's played, and the Briar announcement I thought was handled really, really well from just how it was explained. But this one I feel like needed a lot more attention to just explaining what's happening here, and I think that's a real big miss on LSS's part for the players, because not only does it hurt the players who are heading to these events, the competitive minded players, but I actually think it hurts the game because it's really unclear and a bit of faith gets lost in what's happening here. I think we need a much more structured system for how ban restricted announcements are handled, in terms of, okay, this is the timeline that we run to. And yes, okay, LSS have it within their power to maybe step in outside of those times, but to leave ambiguity coming into May 2nd as this kind of looming guillotine date, they've now effectively left everyone in limbo up until this date, except I will say the players who are obviously playing in Taiwan, Krakow, and these battle hardens that are happening this month. But let's remember that last time they made a change with Briar, they announced that change well in advance and said, hey, no changes for Australian and New Zealand nationals. They were really clear about that. So they could have done something similar here as well, which is something that I want to point out could have been done.
Well, they did that because they didn't want to rug pull everybody, and that's just what they're freaking doing now. It's like, oh, we're gonna ban Briar and Errata her, but Australia, New Zealand, we don't want to screw you guys over. You guys have been prepping for this, and this you didn't expect to have this ban, so we're gonna institute this little rule that makes it reasonable for you. As a viewer, did I want to watch that same meta? No, I'd like to see Briar banned, but they allowed this courtesy for those players, and now there's like, hey, we're just going to collectively rug our entire pro scene because we think like the intent is for it to be more like interesting, and nobody likes that. Everybody doesn't like that. This if we got a ban restricted announcement 2 days ago, right, when it was scheduled, it was already a decently short amount of time if they shook it up, right? If they banned like, okay, they're like, yeah, we're gonna ban Starvo, Scalata, and we're gonna unban Plunder Run. So it's like, oh, what the hell goes on now, right? We still have only like 6 weeks, and those last 2 weeks are kind of a wash. They're kind of a wash for people traveling because Hayden's he's doing like 2 days in travel, and then he's jet lagged, right? So, man, APAC that's going to the Pro Tour, oof, I mean, they're the most pissed off.
6 days to play test, baby.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, so there is a piece of that, right? I think to the other suggestion I've heard is, hey, get this piece you want to. So there's one suggestion, right? Is make the announcement now and leave it alone for the April scene, right? Let Taiwan, let Krakow, let the Battle Hardens play out with this current format. Don't like you say, quote unquote, rug pull those players, but give an adequate timeline ahead for New Jersey and ProQuest Season 2. And I'm lumping this all together because we can't just say, oh, the pro players, the Pro Tour, the Pro Tour. It's not. It's the players going to the calling. It's the players playing the Battle Harden. It's the players playing ProQuest Season 2. So many people are impacted by this announcement. It's not just 200, 250, 300 people that are going to play in Pro Tour New Jersey. Everyone that's going to play in that calling, everyone that's going to play at that Battle Hardened event, it's everyone that's going to play in ProQuest Season 2. So let's not forget that as well. But the other thing that people suggest is, hey, why not give a bit more extra time? Why not say, okay, we're going to make this next announcement at the end of April, give 3 weeks. I think the reason for that is pretty clear. Start of the show wouldn't have had the time to get all those Living Legend points, and that's where it goes back to your thing about the congruity of using Living Legend, and I completely agree. So I think that one for me is kind of off the table. I don't think that was ever something they would have done. Doesn't make sense, and it also doesn't fit with what they're clearly trying to do, I think, at this point. So for me, it's make the announcement now, or, just be really, really clear about what's happening on May 2nd. Like, why is there an announcement on May 2nd? Why wait for all this? Like, I think this whole thing of like putting the format into the elite players' hands is, I think that could be cool. But I think, let us know about that. Why couldn't we have known about that a month ago? Had LSS come out and said this, Brendan, I'll ask you this, right? Had LSS come out and said, in, let's say, the middle of ProQuest season, hey, we're monitoring the situation with Star of the Show. We have a ban and restricted announcement happening on 5th of April. We're also going to have an additional ban and restricted announcement coming on May 2nd. Would that not have at least prepared you for what's about to happen and let you make some decisions? Because I've, personally, and I know a lot of people have made decisions on when I'm going to travel to the Pro Tour already, because you have to have that locked in, made decisions about leave and testing time and things like that, because we're literally 6 weeks out now. So everyone was aiming for this date. Hey, the date is 5th of April, and it's all the 6 weeks full steam ahead, heading towards New Jersey and ProQuest Season 2 and the calling. Had LSS been really upfront and said, there's also going to be an announcement on May 2nd, at least we can prepare for that.
Sure. Still bad decision, but
sure.
Okay, right?
I agree.
If you've ever heard me criticize Legend Story Studios for this, speaking of anniversary episode, throughout this entire year, it's because of one thing, right? It's when they say things that just are kind of BS, right? Where it's like, no, that's not actually what's happening, right? Like, that's not true. They're like, this is just, you just feel out of touch by saying this. And they're like, hey, we're going to do these special Welcome to Wraith events, but they're going to be capped at 20 people and there's only one store in your entire state. And you're like, yeah, I guess that's cool, right? Like, that's additional. And this is obviously the smallest one. And then we get to the bigger ones where it's like, hey, we're going to allow you to gift PTIs. And I'm okay with gifting PTIs. Don't accuse me of not being okay with that. I'm cool. Sell them. Do whatever you want. But it's like the word gift. It's just like, why use that word? If it's legal, I understand. But coming from when I'm getting information from LSS, when they say stuff like that, I'm like, people aren't going to gift them. It's just like, are you like, do you not understand how the world works or what's going on here? And like when they come across that way, that's what irritates me. And that's what the same thing is here. So it's like, yeah, there's like maybe like living legend. It's like, no, that's not the intent. Or you've just changed that up last minute. It's like, oh, it's going to make it more fun. It's like, no, that's not why you put the Pro Tour at the end of a set. Like, come on, like level with us and just be honest and be more transparent and just like acknowledge what's actually happening. And for me, that's really what irritates me. Other than that, I think they're a great company. They execute things fantastically well, but this is starting to creep in more and more, and it's got to stop. It just has got to stop.
All right, we've actually talked about. I didn't realize how long.
Has it been a while? Yeah,
it's been a while, but you know what? It's I think we both feel the same way that this is probably the biggest decision so far that is not sitting well with. It's clearly not sitting well with the player base for various different reasons. From handling that has been suspect to a decision that didn't feel congruent with the rest of the decisions made to just the kind of stress that there's been now being put on players. You want it to be fun, right? So there's a lot of things happening there. We could probably go on about this, and I know you've done the Twitter Spaces, and there's a lot of opinions out there. That's probably kind of the bulk of our opinions and what we feel that LSS could have done better, and we just want to see them do better. I agree with you, Brendan. Like, I think so far, the game of Flesh and Blood, I friggin' love, and that's because there's an amazing company behind it. But hey, time to call out a bad decision here and say something needs to happen here with this, because these kind of decisions can't continue. It's not good for the health of the game, and I think that's kind of our responsibility to call that out, to be honest. So anyway, Brendan, I want to talk a little bit about what this means for Pro Tour number 1. Let's now, so this has happened. It is what it is. Let's move forward. May 2nd, we're going to get another announcement. What does this mean for Pro Tour number 1? What do you think is actually going to happen in your eyes? What do you think May 2nd is going to bring us? We head to PT1 calling and Pro Tour season.
Yeah, so all emotion out the window. Let's start talking about just like how we're going to execute here and like what might happen. So we're looking at testing and preparing for multiple different formats. You have to be doing that, or you're doing all of your testing after the announcement, and it's probably not great, right? So we still have this time, right? We still have
2
this
weeks off work.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. How do you work with it? So you're going to be testing for multiple different formats. The most likely one, and the one that is, after reading this article, I almost guarantee it's going to happen, is that Starvo's banned, right? So I wouldn't test a format where Starvo exists. I don't think it's going to happen. It still could, right? Starvo still could exist, but then you can just revert to all the info we have already leading up to all these callings and all. You're good, right? So test as if Starvo's gone. Then you got to get into this is where it gets weird. It's like, what else do they hit? Okay, Scalita is a bit of a weird engine. It restricts design space. It's getting a little bit powerful now. Maybe they hit it. They're probably going to hit it in Blitz, because in Blitz it's literally bologna sandwich. It's not good. But yeah, so you maybe go, okay, Starvo plus Scalita, and then there's like these kind of like rogue bans where it's like, okay, maybe they hits like a Luminaris, or they unban a Plunder Run, or they do some like weird errata on like the pulses. Please no, right? But I don't think anything past like Scalita and Starvo being banned, you get into really weird territory, and then you go from testing. There's like 2 reasonable formats you can test for. After that, it's like the next tier of like reasonableness. I know it's not a word. Is like 15 formats, right? Like it's too much, right? So I think you kind of test for these 2 things, like a hit on Viscera and a hit on Starvo. Starvo just not existing. And like those are the formats you play with. Again, if there is literally no changes, and you just revert to the data we had before.
Yeah, I just want to call out thoughts to me, please, as the producer of this podcast, for having to manage Brendan's audio during this last segment.
Some people, sometimes I get passionate. It happens about one every 2 episodes, but sometimes I get passionate.
It's fine. Okay, no, I agree. I think what I'm reading into this article, and I agree, there's all these things around it about like the congruency and the announcement itself and the way it's handled, but the wording to me feels so strong that there's going to be a different format for this Pro Tour, and whatever shape that takes. And I think that the most likely shape that takes is Living Legend for Star of the Show, or a banning to Star of the Show. If for some reason, I think, let's look at the Living Legend points, it has to win, I think, like just over half of these events. Well, it has to win the calling, right, is the really important one. So we kind of know once Taiwan rolls around, if it doesn't win, then probably isn't getting Living Legend.
It's actually pretty likely, to be fair. It has to win 4 out of 5 events, right? So, yeah. So I think it's pretty likely it doesn't get Living Legend.
But then there's the banning piece. So basically, I'm reading to this that we're going to have some changes regardless. And I think, to Brendan's point, the most likely is no star of the show or a very heavily nerfed star of the show, whether it be through card bannings. I mean, the worst one we've talked about this would be just banning Awakening. It kind of does nothing, I think, in terms of just like...
That'd be hilarious.
Doesn't really change the format. Not because the card's not good, but just because it just doesn't really change the format that much. New star of the show is still really prevalent. We saw Michael Hamilton win with that in his deck list. We know what these decks can look like without Awakening and the impact of it. So yeah, I expect to see something, and then Scalata or like Sonata or some sort of ban, or like I guess power nerf to Viserai is what people are expecting next, and I would say is somewhat likely. So I agree. I think we need to remember is like, what does this mean for all of the events? Well, yeah, the elite group of players, quote unquote, get 11 days to work with us, right, Brendan? But hey, also, all the ProQuest players who want to play for ProQuest Season 2 get 11 days to deal with this, and all the players who are playing in New Jersey at the Calling only get 11 days to deal with this. So I just want to put my, just shout out to all those players who are planning to play those events, because everyone is in the same boat. We've kind of talked about how we feel about this. What does it mean for ProQuest Season 2? I actually think it's really interesting for ProQuest Season 2, and I think this announcement is, if I'm putting a positive spin on it, which I guess we haven't really done, so I'd like to put some positive on it. I think this plays out really well for ProQuest Season 2, because we're going to get this this Pro Tour. People are going to be able to pick up decks from the Pro Tour and from the Calling New Jersey and run those into ProQuest Season. I think ProQuest Season could feel really diverse, potentially. It depends on what actually happens on May 2nd. But we could have quite an unrefined Pro Tour, even because of the amount of time and the Calling as well, where there will be a few really strong decks, a few teams will come to a few things. Then ProQuest, we might even see like a move on of that, and then we get our next set. So I do want to put a little bit of a positive spin on that, because I think there are some things that are going to come out of this that are going to work well alongside what Brian Gottlieb said about the coverage being really interesting and people wanting to tune into an event where the format is kind of all up in the air.
Yep, for sure, Hayden. But I think that the sort of residual and collateral damage you do on the way towards that is heavily exceeds those positive benefits. But maybe I am being a bit aggressive, but it's only because I don't want it to happen again.
You're passionate, right? And I think I hope people take that as that's how we're speaking about this. I just want to reiterate again is that we don't feel like the game is failing. We don't feel like we have animosity towards LSS, right? Like this is a critique. This is how we feel. This is how the community feels, and we're being voices for that. I think for a lot of people out there who are feeling very similar, and that just a reality of where we are right now. And I think really at the end of the day, just needs to be done better. We need improvement from this, and I did not expect to be spending our 1 year anniversary, our 52nd episode, maybe this negative, because this might be the most negative that we've ever been about an announcement from LSS, but it's true, and that's where we are right now. So we've talked a bit about that. What does that mean for, I guess, players testing? You've said that, Brendan. You mean probably having to test multiple formats. It probably means having to be really nimble and to be able to adapt to that announcement on May 2nd and being able to go in multiple directions. So some of the tough things is like, okay, access to cards, like that is a real thing. How are people feeling about
a lot of cards?
Access to cards? Yeah. Just time. So I know for me, I'm going to be trying to get a lot of work done in the few days leading up to the announcement so that I have some more free time on those days prior to traveling to the Pro Tour, which is going to be really difficult, but I'm going to try my best to do that, to have as much time as possible with the clarity, with the full information at my disposal to test. I'm also looking at, I guess, and I would suggest that to people as well, like try and find those times, try and make that a priority. I think prior to that testing time, my advice would be, is like, we have kind of an idea of what we think will happen. Like Brendan said, there's probably no point in testing a format with Star of the Show right now, because in reality, even if that does end up being the format, well, we've got a lot to go off of previous data. And maybe you want to get some reps in because you're not familiar with Star of the Show. That's fine. I wouldn't make it a priority. I would focus on what could be. And for me personally, it's like looking at other decks. Like, hey, what are heroes that maybe were held down by Star of the Show because it wasn't viable, right? Because of Star of the Show, plain and simple. What are some of those heroes and decks? Let's run those in. How do they go into Prism, Viserai, or these decks? And then what could the format adapt to? What are some cards that we weren't playing because we had to have spots for Star of the Show, et cetera, et cetera? That's what I would focus on when it comes to the impact of this announcement.
I agree. For players coming from, APAC or other far regions, I think there's an interesting strategy, and I don't know the correct answer on how you sort of navigate this one. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we are at a bit of a disadvantage, but I think it's impacting everyone. Let's be honest. Like, yeah, it means that we in reality, I guess your flight is what, like 4 hours to the Pro Tour. Mine is 26.5 hours or something, plus time zone changes and some needing
Yeah.
some sleep either side of that. But yeah, I mean, it's what is that? It's 3 days. I mean, really, it's not that much of an impact comparatively. Like we're all kind of in the same boat when it looks to that. Let's think about one last question. I guess I have for you, Brendan, is like, let's just say James White hands you the keys right now and says, "Hey, Brendan, we want you to fix this. We know we've made a bit of a blunder. What would you do right now? Right now, what would you do? Would you change something? Would you make another announcement? Well, like what if you were LSS right now, just
Yeah.
hearing the community
I would
feedback? What's the next thing you would do?
I would capitulate, which I think is like 99% of the time it's the wrong thing to do is to actually like listen to your community and
Yeah.
go back on your decisions. Like you're the studio, like you need to show conviction, right? And it's actually my issue with this announcement. It looks like they don't have conviction, right? They just punted it. But this is so bad that and it's not just the reception is so bad because I don't think that you should base your decisions off reception. I think that this like what this is doing to the game and like from a player standpoint, from an enjoyment standpoint, and just from like a pro tour integrity standpoint, is just bad, right? And I think if they agree at all, they should capitulate and just and capitulate means they just go back on what they said. They go, hey, we made a they do the old classic. We made a mistake. We've all seen that screenshot from the from from the Dustblade band. They said, "We made a mistake. Here's what it's actually going to look like, and just please, like, yeah, just give us back like the Pro Tour that we've been expecting for a long, long time now, right? We had this scheduled announcement. Like, I just think you go back on it this time. Like, there's so many things that the community has been angry about in the past, and Alice has banned something or chosen not to ban something, and there's been overwhelming feedback that they should do that. I would never have suggested they go back on what they did. This is the first time because I think the decision's very atypical, and I don't think that it actually represents their core values. That they could actually just go back on it and fix the issue. Whether that I don't know what the changes are, but yeah, they just go back. This one is the only one ever. I'm not a fan, but only this one.
It's tough. It's so tough. I think if it was me in that situation, as much as I think as a player and as a member of the community, I want that as well. I want some clarity first of all, but I also want them to make a better decision. I think it's kind of past, and I think I agree that there kind of needs to be a bit of commitment to this. But I think the main thing is they need to learn from this and just basically, I think they need some internal reviews and to come with a better process for this next time, and to get a better handle on the community, be more in touch with the community. I think as a small studio, it's something they have to do, and I think they were really good at it for a very long time. And the expansion into North America really challenged that. But now it feels like, yeah, there's a lot of learnings to be had to be more in touch with the community. So if it was me, I think probably I'd stick with this announcement. I would possibly publish more clarity on this announcement and just be really brutally honest about where we see the game right now and what's happening. But that probably wouldn't change the decision that I'd make around May 2nd if that was the decision that they're going for. That's clearly for a reason. That's the decision. I get it. They want the piece that they said at the end around a clean, like a fresh format, whatever it is. That's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but I mean, it is what it is, and that's the decision made. But I think that's the decision they stick with. But yeah, I mean, the big thing would be, hey, we need to learn from this and we need to do a better job. And also maybe we need to give the community right now something, and that is clarity. And yeah, actually that might make some people more angry, more upset. But I think that's going to give people a bit more information to work with. And at the moment, it's just a whole lot of things up in the air, and that's really tough for a growing player base.
There's a respect thing, right? Like you can earn respect even by making a decision that I disagree with. If it looks like, yeah, like if you just have conviction and you explain it, when you have these sort of, incongruities and these sort of hypocritical, writings, these things just contradict everything you said before. It looks like there's, I don't know. Like I said, who's driving this thing? That's the question. Hayden, I have a question for you. If they went back on it, they're like, okay, reviewing this, didn't go through the correct channels. This is actually maybe not what we want. And after seeing all the feedback, we actually kind of disagree with it. And we're gonna go ahead and give you the ban restricted list right now. And here's what it is. Would you? And let's say they go for all these events leading up to it, it's not enforced. Would you, as a player, lose respect for the studio?
No, I think it'd be in the delivery.
Gave in.
Yeah, it'd be in the delivery. It'd be like you said before, conviction. So if they like really said, "Yep, like we have listened, and also we made a few internal mistakes," like being really honest about it and done it with conviction, say like this is what's happening now. Then no, I wouldn't be upset about that. I'd be like, hey, look, they've already learned and they've decided to make a really tough decision to say like, hands up, fucked it, like we did it wrong, we did you dirty. Like here's the actual, here's what we're gonna do. Fine. But I think they can't half-ass it and be like, oh, well, actually, like, listen to this, and we're gonna change this, and this is what it's gonna look like, and no more clarity really around like why things have been announced the way they are. Then that's kind of, yeah. I wouldn't say I lose respect. I feel like I have the utmost respect for the studio and James White and what everyone's doing. I just want to see some things be enacted a bit better, and this is not a great decision, I think.
Maybe faith is a better word than
Yeah.
respect.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Faith in the studio.
Yeah. I think that would actually. I wouldn't lose faith if they made that announcement. I think that might even restore a bit of faith, to be honest. As much as I don't think it's the thing I would do, I think it could. So, and I think it would restore probably some faith within the player base. But I think, like this is a reasonable sized bump on the road. But I don't think it's gonna, it's not derailing the train or anything. But a few more of these could, and that's where I think they need to really take an introspective look and make sure that they improve on these sort of decisions. All right, Brendan, want to wrap this up and talk a quick bit about Blitz, because there's also no changes to the Blitz format, and we're heading into Krakow and into multiple battle hardens, and really interesting. I know like Krakow is really soon, so I can kind of understand this decision to make no changes to the Blitz format. And saying that, now having the Blitz format played it and played some skirmish season, I think this format, like we don't have to rehash our episode last week. You can go and watch it. Me and Brendan probably fundamentally disagree. I don't think this is a healthy format. I think it's a good format. I think those are two very different things. Just want to point that out, because someone did put that in the comments and said that I called it a healthy format. I didn't call it a healthy format. I called it a good format. But the point is, I think, is that probably something needs to happen to Blitz. It's probably, like you say, a Escalada Band. Viscerai is, I think, probably just too consistently good in terms of what it does. But I think the rest of the format actually feels really good and really cool and really fun to play.
Yeah, I think that Viscerai doesn't function as intended in Blitz. Like, I don't think that's intentional. It's a very intense gameplay pattern, right? That can't be replicated by many other decks. I also think the Blitz format is played by a few decks, and then a lot of other decks literally can't exist. Like, they can't even compete at like a base level against some of these other decks, because they're so fast and so explosive and so non-interactive. But if that's what the format is, I'm okay with it too. I actually don't think the format's unfun. I agree with you. I don't think it. Well, you said it was good. I don't think it's unfun. I think it's actually decently. It's okay. Like, it's decently fun. But I do not. I definitely believe that some things are functioning not how they were intended to.
All right, Brendan. Before we go, we have to do a Google review. Now, if you do want to get a review in for us to read out on the podcast, you can do this. ratethispodcast.com/Arsenal Pass. Go and leave us a review. A positive review would be nice, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But we probably won't read out negative ones, to be honest. But we've had some funny amazing reviews. Yeah, funny. Brendan wants funny ones. So, Brendan, with that said, take it away. Who have we got? What have we got?
So, this week we got The Revel to My Rune Blood. This is by Earthlore Bounty Good. I like the name. It says, good podcast. I'm hoping that with Brendan and Hayden's help, I can be more than just a mediocre fab player. Well, I doubt it, but hopefully you get to laugh a little bit on the way. So yeah, thanks so much for the review, Earthlore Bounty Good. I agree, by the way. But The Revel to My Rune Blood, chef's kiss on that.
That's the title. That's nice. All right, well,
yeah.
Get your reviews in for Brendan to read out. I heard there's a review from Luke Badger, and he really wants it read out, so you're going to have to dig for that for next week, Brendan.
Read it out in person when we're at the Pro Tour with Luke Badger.
All right. That's it for episode 52 of Arsenal Pass. This is our 1 year anniversary pod. Maybe not quite what we thought we were going to be talking about, but I think really important to do so. Really important to share our views on this and express how the community is feeling. And some people might not be aware of the discourse that's happening for whatever reason. So that is what's kind of happening in the community right now. It'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. Of course, we do have some really big events. We've got multiple battle hardens. Brendan's going to be in Dallas this weekend. We've got Krakow coming up. We've got Taiwan coming up. Watch out for Taiwan Class Constructed. Really going to be interesting to see. I'm also interested to see what happens in Krakow with Blitz. Will Viscerai just dominate? Or will some other decks be out there? Ultim, aggro, these kind of proactive Ultim decks seem good. maybe Rhino, maybe Dash, who knows? Anyway, if you haven't checked out our YouTube page, we're almost at 4,000 subscribers, so please go and drop us a sub and check out some of the content we put up. We just put up a gameplay between Dash and Viscerai. It's a best of 3 game. between myself and Brendan, so enjoy that. Twitter, me and Brendan are both on Twitter. Brendan is at BrendanAPG. I am at Fian_Dale, and it's just started hailing outside at the end of the episode. That's weird. Interact with us. Leave us some interesting questions if you want. Get a question in for the Commander Cookout. Patreon as well. Just want to shout out all of our patrons and a big, massive thank you for everything you allow us to do and for continuing to be our patrons. If you are a patron, make sure you jump into the community Discord. We also do post, monthly extra podcasts up there. We do gameplay reviews. We do like deck guides and stuff during the seasons. So check those out. Otherwise, Brendan, 1 year of Arsenal Pass, 1 year of having to listen to you every week. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.